Good afternoon, everybody. We'll continue with the presentations from the budget, and we have the Department of Administrative Services.
Hi, I'm Charlie Arlinghouse. I'm the Commissioner of Administrative Services, and how are you?
Hi, I'm Cassie Keene. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of DAS.
And just for when we screw up all the answers, behind us is Sherry Rockburn, who's the Assistant Commissioner. So if you see her jumping up and down, I'll have said something stupid, or at least more stupid. I want to talk to you about, I know we don't want to belabor the meeting or anything like that. I want to talk to you a little bit about who we are, why you should care, and what's going on with our budget. In a big picture sense, I'm prepared to talk about any line item, any accounting unit, any detail that you want to talk about. But I have for you a handout, which is slides. I'm going to go through the first half of them, which talk about who we are and some operational challenges and some questions I think you want to know the answer to. And then starting at about slide 9, there's an analysis by division through our major funding sections that takes you through who we are and has a little more detail about what happened, what changed, what's different. But I'm going to start with the Department of Administrative Services, which is a funny name for a department, right? The banking department, you kind of know what they do. They regulate banks. And insurance, you know what they do. They regulate insurance. And so, but in our case, we service administratively. That's a hard thing to say. We're a giant conglomerate that has one thing in common, that we're a central service agency. I described 8 major functions that we have. We have about 19 or 22, depending on how you count, other minor functions, which aren't minor to the people that they're involved with, but things like surplus property distribution, surplus food distribution, federal programs, merchant cards, procurement cards, et cetera, statewide mail distribution. The big picture, though, we run a healthcare program. If you have state benefits, you know that that's a really big thing. It's a $500 million a biennium healthcare plan. It's a very good healthcare plan. It covers lots of people. 37,000 retirees, workers, family members. It's a big thing that we do. The state is self-insured. It does not buy an insurance product. And I venture to say that most people think we do it quite well. Accounting is one of the core functions. In fact, the department started as the Office of the Comptroller. 1931, when someone decided we should have a budget instead of agencies just spending money and coming back when they ran out. So the Comptroller is one of our division directors. We produce the state's books, the ACFR, which used to be called the CAFR. Which if we didn't do, we would have to cease operation, which would be awkward being a state that we do that. But we process 200,000 audited payments a year, something in that range. Don't hold me to that number, but a lot. So the accountants for the state work for us. Software, we manage New Hampshire First, which is the software product that runs all of state payroll, accounting, HR, and just all the functions of the state. And that's the state's computer program, the enterprise computer program for the state. And that's one of our divisions. We manage facilities. This is something that people are very aware of, but only in the background. We manage something like 90 or 92 buildings across the state, including courthouses, including the building that we're in today, including the building across the street, including something like 4 million square feet of office space in Concord. We don't manage the buildings where people stay overnight. So think of the prison, the state hospital, et cetera. But if people aren't staying overnight in that, or at least they're not supposed to be, we manage those buildings. It's a lot of work, and it's a great symbol for a lot of what we do. We do a lot of things that people aren't necessarily aware of, but are critically important that happen. Purchasing, we manage statewide purchasing. In fact, one of the oldest pieces of the department is when the state had a purchasing agent. Now it's much more than one guy who makes sure we're all buying the same paper clips. But it's a significant function. We manage many hundred contracts for statewide purchasing and all commodities. Personnel, the state's personnel office is one of our divisions. Budget control, the state budget officer and the budget staff, and we manage the state budget, which is this committee in particular might realize is a very important function. And then public works is another thing. We build stuff. We don't build roads and bridges, but everything else we're very involved in. So if it's over $25,000 a year, we're involved in the management, the design, the construction, and that is That is a mandate under state law to make sure that people aren't just putting up balsa wood houses and putting people into them. Why should you care? Which is actually the next slide. Every agency, every process in the state requires approvals and cooperation from administrative services to support their mission. I tell people when we interview them that we don't regulate banks. We don't regulate insurance. We don't sell liquor. We don't sell lottery tickets. We don't manage the state's Medicaid program. But every single one of those people who do those things relies on us every single day for what they do. And that's true of the building service worker who cleans the floor. That's true of the purchasing agent who helps them buy things. It's true of the accountants who help them process payments. It's true of lawmakers who require us to administer control processes. That's why the department used to be called the Department of Administration and Control. That's for you. So no matter how big, no matter how small, they rely on us. And so that's what we do. You rely on us to support the integrity of processes around the state. We've had significant staff reductions over the last decade. We have some significant vacancies today, as a lot of agencies do. I think you hear that. But we provide critical support to every agency, big and small. So day in and day out, that's what we do, and we have to meet the needs of every other agency. It's a tremendous privilege to do this and to have people rely upon you. I want to talk to you about how we spend the money we spend. And on slide 4, there's sort of a big picture overview. And I'll discuss it in a couple of details. The one is I'm not going to talk about the attached boards. We are an agency where often when boards are created that nobody knows what to do with, they're independent agencies and they administratively attach them to us. I scour House Bill 2 every year to see what else is going to get appended to us. And this is a list of what is currently there. These are friends of ours, nice people that you will hear from that we work with, but that we do not control, but we provide services to. But I'm going to talk about administrative services. We're 2 agencies. We're retiree health and we're everything else. I say that every year, every budget. I say it to the governor's staff, I say it to the House, I say it to the Senate, because it's important to understand. We are an agency that runs an operation, but half our budget is this big giant thing called retiree health, and it is a significant benefit for state retirees. And you can see from the numbers in front of you that it is an enormous part of what we do. Of the everything else we do, and slide 4 is total funds. Of the everything else we do, half of what we do is plant and property, because maintaining buildings, even maintaining them to the standards that the state finds acceptable, is quite expensive. And so that's a significant thing that we do. And then everything else, all the other functions of the department that I described, is half of that half. In the current budget, you will find an $8 million new item that is not actually a new spend. It's a change to how we allocate facilities expenses. And so it's called here central facilities. And that is to say that we can talk about it in more detail if you want, but the big picture is this. Essentially, every building is an accounting unit, and the expenses of that building are billed to the agency. You want to know how much it costs to run DRA. For example, one of the costs of running DRA is their building. So we manage the building for them, but we allocate the cost, and they pay for that as a transfer. In the past, there are a bunch of central things that were sort of randomly allocated. It's not actually random, but they took the most expensive employee and assigned him to the biggest accounting unit, and so on. And so occasionally it was a decent approximation, an administrative approximation is the best word. And so instead what we've done is there are a whole bunch of expenses that are central. Electricians don't work in one building. They work in 90 buildings. And there's no point in assigning the electrician going, well, we got 2 electricians. Let's pretend one works at safety in that building and one works here. And then we'll assign the painters a different way. We've centralized all that and then we're cost allocating that. That leads to an $8 million internal transfer. It doesn't add to the total state spend, but it's a back and forth. So the accounting unit bills the central transfer. It's an accounting mechanism. It's a very well-designed and approved accounting mechanism, but it leads to an $8 million thing that you will see. But that's not a spend. If you look at page 5, this explains the difference between what the governor proposed and what the House proposed. The differences between the two are very easily explained because there are two of them. The House appropriated $3.6 million additional for the statewide deferred maintenance fund. We have a lot of deferred maintenance needs. Someone said, "You have $3.6 million of deferred maintenance needs?" And I said, if we had an accurate number, it would be about $1 billion. And, we did an ARPA analysis a couple years ago when they were deciding some deferred maintenance things. And we submitted something, and our director of plant and property said, "Well, how big a list do you want?" And I said, "I want a pretty big list, but do, the first 300 million, because there's no way they're going to do more than 20, but do the first 300 million." And she's like, "Okay, that's the right order of magnitude." But if we did a real list, it would be, I don't know, $1 billion. The state, you can tell sometimes if you walk around some of these buildings or if you notice the water in the tunnel, that we do the best we can. And so, but they appropriated 3.6 million, and there's an additional 1.2 million, which is we hope to use to address things like swing space, moving costs. It's expensive to move people, and there's a lot of that going on right now. There's going to be a new building where DOJ is going to go, although that's taken care of with a different appropriation. There's other people that will move into that building. There are renovation projects in Londrigan, in a bunch of buildings across the state. And so there's some of those costs. So we hope to be able to defray some of that with that money. And the House saw fit to grant us that. Those are the two biggest changes. People have said to me, and I presume you're interested too, do you have any vacancies? Turns out we do. Everybody does. This is a list of our vacancies. We have 311 budgeted positions. We have about an 18% vacancy rate. I think we're ticking down. I'm hiring more people every month than I lose on the full-time side. And so I think we're ticking down, but we're ticking down. I believe the state has bottomed out as a whole and is starting to tick up a little bit, but I think it's too early to clap on that. What position changes do we have? If you look at slide 7, somebody said, "What are your new positions? Can you describe all of them in detail?" Yes, I can. This is a handy chart that shows you and will tie back to the budget. There are 3 positions that are new positions for our operations, and we were able to fund these initially in our efficiency target in the agency phase of the budget. The one is a purchasing agent. We have enormous pressure in the purchasing area, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, but we were able to find one more administrator there within our existing targets. An additional position in the Division of Personnel. We have some temporary recruitment people who are working out really well, and there's just an increasing amount of HR work, particularly as we do more and more for smaller agencies, so they have the same level of service that larger agencies do through what we call the HRSU. And then a safety and environmental administrator for the Division of Plant and Property. It's not that we don't do safety today. We do. It's very important. But we don't have a dedicated person. And I think that's a mistake. And our management thinks it's a mistake as well, that in the world we live in and workers' comp and all of that, it's important to have a safety person. As things get more and more complicated, we run more and more boilers and the like. There are 2 maintenance positions, the second column over. If you don't buy Granite Place, you don't have to have a maintenance person for it. If you do buy Granite Place, you have to have a maintenance person for it. If you don't buy Hall Street, where the education might move, the old Granite State College, you don't need a maintenance person. You do buy it, you do need a maintenance person. That's just a thing. Buildings require work. The other 12 positions are on the right-hand column. I want to stress that they're net zero. These are Class 59 positions, full-time temps, they're technically called, although that position is often illusory. There's one guy who's been in a full-time temp position for something like 12 years, so he doesn't really feel that temporary. But this is a conversion of those, so there's no net cost to this. The cost will be borne in Class 10 instead of Class 59. 7 of that is in the building service worker area, where we eliminated a bunch of part-time positions because we've had an enormous struggle hiring not just maintenance staff, but particularly the lowest wage level positions. We can't compete with Dunkin' Donuts today. That's a thing. And so by making some of them full-time, we have at least a shot at filling them. That's that position. That's why it looks like our position count went up by 17 positions. In addition to that, we unfunded 11 positions, which I list. Mostly public works positions where engineers were unable to be filled, but a couple of other things here and there, but we unfunded some positions. So that gets you to where our count is. Those are the big changes. That's kind of where we are. Slide 8, I want to discuss 3 operational challenges. And one request for House Bill 2, which is a lapse extension. So this is the ask portion of the presentation. Procurement, supply chain management. Some of you will know that the governor and council have decided they want to see a lot more contracts than they used to. So our division of procurement has seen the number of contracts they have to send triple, something like 66 to 212. It's an enormous amount of work. If a contract goes to council, there's an additional 8 to 10 weeks of work that goes along with it. There's a lot of effort that goes along with it. And that's something the council controls, and they don't care if you have the staff or not. They just expect you to do it. And as part of the process, to try to keep from losing our entire staff because of the workload, what I would like to do is hire 3 new purchasing agents to manage that. We're both managing a dramatic increase in workload that started something like October 19th, sometime in October. In addition to that, we're trying to do something the state hadn't done before, which is to track on a real-time basis whether we exceed the state tracks constantly whether you spend against your budget or not. Do you have the funds budgeted? What we don't track is whether the price limitation of the contract has been exceeded. And that's something that every agency does easily on a single agency contract. But on multi-agency contracts, which is something we procure, it's not typically tracked. Think of the W.B. Mason contract for office supplies. You know, we don't necessarily know how much corrections, how many paper clips they bought. Although if they need some, I have like 1,000 in my desk. Anyway, that's the biggest ask, and I would just tell you that it's a dramatic thing right now. The second is the annex renovation is going forward finally. This is, as you know, a project that was in a capital budget before the pandemic and that we suspended because it was something that could easily be deferred until after the pandemic. The cost of everything is going up, and this is a scalable request, but if we were to be able to finish the entire building, instead of most of the infrastructure and only some of the space, we would need an additional $4.3 million for that. And I'd like you to consider that. And this is something that really is a one-time fund spend. The procurement isn't, because they would be staff, and that's not one time, that's ongoing operations. And the third thing is the statewide recruitment unit. The state does not recruit. The state did not recruit for years and years and years, and people know that. For a long time, the state didn't have to recruit. We were the state. You opened a job, people were desperate to get into the state. There was a list. People would take a test. They were on a list. We interviewed somebody once. I forget, was it Dawn? Anyway, it was somebody. And I said, how'd you get here? And she said, well, I work for the Industrial Development Authority, and then because I got on a list when I was in high school. And then when that stopped being a state agency and became part of the BFA, that's not the state anymore, and I wanted to stay with the state. And that was the thing. And so, but we're not in that environment anymore. People move a lot. And we need to recruit, and we hadn't been. So we're recruiting very professionally. We have a unit funded by ARPA funds right now. I would like those 3 positions to be permanent, and for the state to continue to recruit and not regard it as having been a one-time thing. I think they do a good job. They've identified a lot of efficiencies and things that people don't do, because the people who are hiring managers aren't hiring managers, they're workers who have a regular job and hire on the side. And the other thing we would like you to consider is about $280,000 for contract services, essentially for advertising. The state also doesn't advertise and hasn't. And things like Indeed. Indeed apparently is where everybody finds a job today. And I embarrassed myself in a meeting by asking about Monster.com. Which apparently doesn't exist anymore. LinkedIn was something I had actually heard of. Handshake and ZipRecruiter are apparently very important things, which I don't know a lot about, but there are people who do. So that's important. The other thing is I have a House Bill 2 request, which is for a lapse extension. We have money, it's in Class 38, and it's for the purpose of implementing scheduling software. It's scheduled to lapse on June 30th. And with the way things are going on, let me put it this way, the governor and council is reconsidering a contract and whether they want to go a certain way or not. And it's likely to put a significant delay into the process of 6 to 9 months. And so there's no way we're going to be able to encumber the funds by June 30th. And I would like you to consider letting it not lapse until June 30th, 2025 instead of 2023, which would allow us to complete the project in a time that works with both our staff and the governor and council. It's obviously not an additional ask, but it's something that would then not lapse. That's the overview of where we are. I have analyses by division if anybody wants them, and I don't know why you wouldn't, but they are there for you. And but mostly, I want to answer any questions you have about specific pieces of our budget, in case you want to know, how surplus food distribution works.
Senator Bertzel.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. Where you say 4 HR coordinator positions convert temp positions to permanent, are they currently already in there as temp positions?
They're, yes, but they're ARPA funded.
Follow?
Yes, ma'am.
Are they filled with
Yes.
contract help?
They are,
They're filled temporary full-time employees.
And who did you go through for those?
they're not contract, I'm sorry, they're full-time temp positions, they're not contractors, they're state employees.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Additional questions? Senator Rosman.
I do have a few, actually. First of all, these additional requests that you're asking us for, did you ask the House and did they say no? Or did you not bring these requests to the House?
The former, we asked the House and they said no.
Okay. Could I follow up?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
The
you.
lapse extension, we did not ask in the House phase, I'm sorry.
Okay, but
That's
the
a
other
recent thing,
ones-
but the other ones we did,
That was a recent council decision, so.
yes.
So on retiree health, I see that from the 22 actuals to 23 adjusted authorized, there's a huge increase. And then 24 goes down a little bit, but 25 jumps up 10%. On 24, could you talk to us a little bit about
I can, I'm gonna
up and down?
I'm gonna let Cassie talk a little bit about it. I can tell you that the actuals are down from the 22 budget because of a wonderful procurement effort that was done by Risk and Benefits in switching to a Medicare Advantage a product that saved us tens of millions of dollars. And so that's why the one number is, I'm gonna call it artificially low. And I think we're actually gonna come in significantly lower than, is it 67, whatever it was.
You think you're coming in lower?
We think we're gonna come in low from that, but Cassie can talk a little bit about that.
We have a procurement on the street for retiree health, and that's what Charlie's referencing. So of all the health care that we deliver, Medicare retiree health is fully insured. And we made that change back in 2019, following, some of you may remember, several years in fiscal 16 and 17 of some real challenges in the retiree health where we found ourselves like $10 million deficit. So one of the things we did at that time was we did a study of options. What can we do with the retiree health benefit plan to bring it down into within budget, because we can only spend what is budgeted. And one of the options we looked at was moving to a Medicare retiree health benefit plan, Medicare Advantage. At the time, it was the market in New Hampshire wasn't ripe for it, but what happened over the course of a year is the networks actually came into being, and we moved in 2019 to a Medicare Advantage plan. I think the first year we saved, pardon? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I don't have the year by year. Anyway, we've saved tens of millions of dollars since 2019 on Medicare Advantage. And we're currently in a contract with Aetna, and when we went out to bid, we were shockingly surprised and thrilled that they bid a 0 rate for medical services, not pharmacy, right? And so you say, how can they do that? It's because they're leveraging Medicare funding from CMS, and in contracting with us, are making the bet that they're going to be able to operate within the federal funds. So what happened is we had an enormous savings in retiree health, and what we say internally is we may have pulled one of the last rabbits out of our hat with that. And so what's going to happen, we believe in the procurement, is that possibly the cost of retiree health goes up. Maybe we'll be lucky again.
So Sherry reminded me that we're probably gonna lapse about 10 million from retiree health this fiscal year. If you look at the chart on page 21, it shows you how before we did the Medicare Advantage cost containment, we had a steadily rising slope. If you look at those lines going up, the reductions in 19, 20, 21, and 22 are because of Medicare Advantage. If you look at the 23, that's the budgeted line. What we expect to actually spend if we lapse will probably be halfway between 22 and 24. If that happens, there will be the slope from 22, 23, 24, 25 will be the same slope. And that's why you see what's happening. So while we did think of Medicare Advantage as having sort of reset our spending, like instead of the line continuing to go up, we went whoop, but it's going to go up again because healthcare costs aren't,
Can I continue? Thank you. So
Absolutely.
it's that lapse of $10 million that you're expecting, is that on the surplus statement? Or is that,
It's my
New
understanding
lapse.
is it's not extra lapse. My understanding is that the amount, I'm not privy to the House lapse discussions and in deciding what to carry, but it's not that different from the governor. I know in the governor's phase, the governor's budget director specifically asked us what we expected. And so the lapse numbers, which as you know, for 23 are historically large in a budgeting sense, take that into account.
it's in there?
Yeah.
Okay. If I could ask one more question.
Certainly, Senator.
The central facilities, that 8 million, is that percentage of square footage that you charge all the different agencies for their
No,
floor
it's,
space?
I know what you mean, and it isn't. So the what you're talking about. So we have a charge to agencies. You don't see an agency's budget. I think it's listed as transfer to general services, and it's class 29, I think. I hope Sherry's nodding. And in addition to,
Not.
we charge them, actual expenses. Like if your utility bill is this, it's charged that accounting unit anyway, this, which is often one agency. We add to that 75 cents a square foot for a maintenance fund to do, fix the roof that needs fixing, not the roof where there happens to be money. That's a fund. The extra money the House put in that I talked about, deferred maintenance, is that fund. Central Facilities Bureau is, the best way to think of it is as internal accounting. It's internal cost allocation. We're basically taking, I'm going to oversimplify, right? We're taking 50 staff who do work on multiple buildings. Electrician is a good example. Painter is a good example. And we're taking a cost like that, or the snowplow contract, and we're then allocating it across a set of buildings. And so that accounting unit will be charged by the Central Facilities Bureau. If you look at page 16, there's a graphical explanation which will make your head spin for exactly how this works. We allocate costs, they reimburse them. So agencies aren't paying that, we're billing ourselves internally.
So it's not a double accounting?
We're
not seeing these same charges in any agency
You won't see them in
budget?
any agency budget, but within our own budget, it's an internal double accounting. So if you think about, think about DOIT. right? DOIT or the rent-like charges we charge. That's double accounting, right? It's in everybody's budget. And you see that because it's two agencies. We're doing the same thing internally.
Okay. Thank you.
Additional questions? Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Charlie, thank you for the presentation. Kate, thank you, Cassie. Cassie does a super job with the medical, and I've danced through it many times, so the dance is not complete, but it's well done. I must say this. Charlie, I want to know how you evaluate the condition of buildings and decide when these buildings will be addressed.
It's a complicated question. There are two or three different ways. One is every year annually, the facilities bureaus, we manage buildings through what's currently 3 and will become 2 facilities bureaus. The courts have a separate bureau, the general services has most buildings, and then their HHS years ago, 20 years ago, used to have its own facility staff. That was eliminated and folded in. But anyway, those staffs go through the building. Think about it with a clipboard. I think it's actually a laptop or an iPad or whatever we use instead. Tablet, thank you. Tablet these days. And we go, okay, that, and we need to paint there. And we do a list. And then the maintenance staff will prioritize. What we're doing new this year is we're actually using the maintenance fund to do this. We're going to hire professional evaluators. There is in the facilities industry, people do this. Donnie Perrin is our new general services head who works for Karen Tamaki, who you've probably met. And he did this when he was at Plymouth State, I think, where they have people come in and they're engineers and they're architects and they're various people, and they will evaluate every system in your building and determine life expectancy and condition. And we will do that and as a start, we're going to do with all of the executive branch buildings downtown.
Further question?
Certainly.
Now, we've had this conversation before. The old main building at New Hampshire Hospital. That thing has been in disarray for a long period of time. I went through that building in the 1970s when they actually were prisoners in the bottom floor, and that was where the secure psychiatric unit was held. Now, if it weren't for Leon Calawa, many of those buildings would not have been renovated. Leon was the genius behind it and did a great, great job. But that building and the people working in that building, that has got to be dealt with, Charlie. I mean, you got people on that second floor who are chasing, people who are negligent in terms of paying payments. They're after them all the time, and they're working in very poor conditions. Good, hard-working state employees, but in terrible positions. And I've talked to you about that. That's got to be dealt with. I mean, we can't let that go on.
No, it's a dump. There's no question about it. And it's a giant building with a lot of state workers in it, and it's just a dump. And I'm a big believer that, we have like governing council breakfasts and things like that, and they always go to the newest building that we just rebuilt. And so I think the governing council think everything looks like DRA or the Marine Patrol in Guilford. And I want to do a meeting in the basement of Main Building or in Johnson Hall or Londrigan. The 3 worst buildings in the state system, I think. Well, there's a lot of debate about that, but Main Building, Johnson Hall, and Londrigan. And the obstacle to fixing a building is 2 things. One is money. It's really, really, really expensive to fix a building. It's not actually much cheaper than building new, because you have to fix everything that you didn't have to fix because you didn't renovate. And for example, the annex, somebody said, are you going to improve the HVAC system? And because the HVAC system has to meet a certain standard, and our engineer on it, she said, well, we currently don't have one. So yes, it'll be much better. And that's what happens in every building. The other obstacle to renovating a building is people. They're in it.
Right.
And until they're out, you have to have somewhere for them to go. For example, we're taking advantage of Londrigan being empty, and we're going to do significant work in Londrigan where Department of Education was. And so we have to triage that, but I would say the top 3 buildings on my list and most people's list are Londrigan, Johnson, and Maine.
And I'm sure that your budget reflects some of that priority in there. we do need to move on.
Well, just one last question, if I might, Mr. Chairman. The Department of Education is in a building. We allowed them to transfer money from the robotics fund to pay for renovation of the bathrooms in that building. Now, I noticed in the capital budget, there's a request to buy another building to move the Department of Education. And that request was 10.7 million, it's down to 7.2 million. What's going on here? We renovated a building that they were in. We transferred money from one account to another so that they could have enough money to make the changes that they wanted, and now they want to move out of that building.
So there are three different things going on. One is this started out as asbestos remediation in Londrigan. There were a number of areas where contract work was done not by state officials, but by other people who didn't check whether there was asbestos, and there was some exposure issues, and so we fixed that. My understanding of the transfer of the robotics fund, and I'll get lost on which accounting unit paid for what, was that it was for rent, because the commissioner at the time wanted to move everybody out rather than do like remediate asbestos on the first floor and have people on 2 and 3. The bathrooms, the asbestos, and the elevators have always been 3 separate projects. And what we're trying to do is to do them at the same time and do them all while people are out. We've bid the project.
We're getting too far down into the weeds.
Okay,
We're not
all right,
gonna-
with that I'm done, but
we're
we
not
can
gonna
talk
get-
offline.
We're not gonna get through with the rest of the departments unless we keep this up a little higher. Did you have anything else you wanted to ask Senator
No,
Lasandra?
but, Mr. Chairman, I think we ought to know when we spend money over and over again and come up with no results.
And when we get to the part where we're executing the budget, I expect that your conversations will then be in order, and we will discuss them to whatever detail you want. But for the agency presentation, I would like to move on, and Senator Rosenwald had an additional
I
question.
do. Has the department had any discussions with the Medicaid program in terms of whether you could work together on the pharmacy program to be a bigger joint purchaser and save everybody money?
We've had a lot of discussions over the years. I don't want to mislead you to think that there's something fruitful going on right now, but I know that there are discussions that are, and for example, I have a call to return today, literally, from the state rep who's head of the, Gary Merchant, thank you, the Prescription Drug Affordability Board. And so those kind of discussions happen constantly. In the past, it has not been a good choice for the state healthcare plan, but that doesn't mean it can't be in the future.
Senator Bradley.
Can you give us the 50,000-foot synopsis of the sale of Laconia? In particular, is it likely to happen in this budget cycle?
Probably, but maybe. Big picture, there's a process that went essentially through the governor and council. We solicited proposals to buy the property. We selected one. That person is in the middle of a due diligence phase. They're allowed 2 due diligence phases in the middle of the second. The due diligence phase expires about the end of this fiscal year. I expect it to take longer than that, though, because the biggest discussion point is the Winnipesaukee River Basin project, transfer of the water and sewer rights, essentially. From a project that didn't envision things that were being transferred is now having to consider how to transfer. The city is involved in those discussions and has to be. We're not. I think that it is more likely than not that this purchase group will get to the finish line and buy the property. But I want to say more likely than not is not the same thing as absolutely certain. I don't want to, it's a very, very complicated property. It's a very, very complicated deal.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no additional questions, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Child Advocate is up next.
Good afternoon. My name is Cassandra Sanchez, and I'm the child advocate for the state of New Hampshire. I have with me Karen Kimmel from my office to share our budget today, and there are some handouts going around for our budget presentation. I will start off with just a brief introduction of the office and what it is that we do, if you are unfamiliar with our office. So our office is an oversight agency, and we have oversight of executive branch agencies that serve children. We have the expanded jurisdiction that changed in December of 2020, and that is a time where we expanded to all executive branch child serving agencies rather than the initial jurisdiction, which was oversight over DCYF and juvenile justice. And so with the expanded jurisdiction, we've had to expand the office over time, as that oversight is quite broad, as there are a lot of child serving agencies that fall under the executive branch, which also includes the Department of Education. And just a brief to share what our office functions do. We receive complaints from the public about any of these child serving agencies. We do have the discretion to review these complaints. We can do reviews of these records and reach out to the agency to address them. We also review all incidents involving children in New Hampshire. That can include child fatalities, missing children, severe injury to a child, as well as parent fatalities. And we work at multiple levels, so the macro and micro level, to provide recommendations for system reform to better serve our children and ensure that our children are protected in this state. So that's an overview of our office as a whole. If you flip to the comparison of the House Finance to the governor, I will start there with sharing what the governor proposed as well as what House Finance proposed. There also there's a slide sheet there as well that matches with much of this, but given the time constraint, I'm going to focus on the changes between the governor and House Finance, and then those on the slides that we have here that are outstanding and have not been addressed by either of those budgets. So to start with, some of our prioritized needs in our budgets, one of which is a public relations representative and training officer, was not covered. If you see the governor and House Finance, they covered the same permanent classified position. So they did not provide any funding for that position. The importance of that position for the office is twofold. One is that we are often speaking in the media to educate the public on the findings of the office. And so having someone specifically in that role to communicate with our media on a regular basis, build those relationships so that we can outreach when there are critical issues going on and inform the media is quite critical to the work that we do, and ensuring that there's transparency to the public about what's happening in our child welfare system. And then also this role, trifold, this role would also cover social media. We have found through our strategic planning process that we could use some strengthening of our social media presence. We do have a social media presence at this time. The majority of those followers are adult followers. We understand that at this state, children use social media to communicate the majority of the time, and the demographic that we're really trying to reach through social media is our children, and we are missing that population. So as someone who can focus solely on that role and looking into that, as opposed to those of us now in the office who are dividing that up with our other workload, would allow us better outreach to the children. We're currently doing a very good job reaching children placed in residential facilities because we have easy access to those facilities. We are missing children living in the community with their families. We're missing children living in the community in foster homes. And we understand that those children have just as high of needs as those in the residential facilities. And so we really would like to be able to reach them better. As well as this role would cover training officer. And so because our office is tasked with making recommendations for the best interests of children, we have to stay up to date on all of the research. And we take a lot of trainings. We engage in group trainings as well as external conferences to stay up to date on the research, as well as reading research as it comes out. So having somebody in the office whose responsibility is tracking down those trainings in the areas in which we need to expand as an office would be helpful to us staying up to date on all that we need to know. And currently, as I had mentioned, with the other roles, that is handled with the staff already in the office. We currently have 7 full-time staff and 1 part-time. And with those positions, we are fully staffed. We did have a period of time that we had one open position. Otherwise, we have maintained fully staffed positions in the office throughout the existence of the office. The next prioritized need noted there speaks about a legal secretary full-time position. So that is the current part-time position that we have, and we are looking to extend that to full-time. That was covered in both the governor and the House Finance budget. So that's one increase that we have from the current fiscal year. We also had an increase in our technology software. So we got this increase specifically in House Finance. We did request funds for assistance with our case management system. And so as you'll see in the prioritized needs under case management system, it notes that we were in 2018 afforded a pilot of Salesforce. And we've been using that since that time frame. And so we've been paying the licensing for that, but it has stayed in the form that it was provided to us in the pilot. That pilot does not necessarily keep up with the changing of the times and the work that we do in the office. And to be able to enhance and better track the outcomes of the office, we do need to do some work with our Salesforce to better fit that. We would really like to be able to track outcomes and be able to share that information publicly, but at this time, the way our system is set up, we don't have the ability to track outcomes at all. And some of our other data is not as clear or as easy to interpret as we would like it to be, so that it can help better reinforce the recommendations that we're making for system change. So as I mentioned, that was provided in House Finance. That's not in the governor's budget there. And moving along, an additional, so we have 3 additional pieces of the lines of the budget that were not in the governor's budget, but were supplied by House Finance, one of which is employee training. And I did speak a little bit already about the importance of training for the office staff. The other 2 are in-state and out-of-state travel. Those are also critical to our role. As I had mentioned, we do a great job reaching children in residential facilities. And the reason for that is because we travel to them in person to meet with the children on site, to meet with the staff on site, ensure that they know what our mandate is and that the children have the right to reach out to us, and also to review and assess those facilities and ensure they're meeting children's needs as well as following the New Hampshire state laws. And so as you see, some of that is out-of-state travel. At this time, New Hampshire still places a good number of children out of state at facilities. That could include nearby states like Massachusetts and Vermont, but it can also include states further away. We have children placed in Florida, Tennessee, Arkansas. So over the past summer, we did have an opportunity to visit one of the facilities in Arkansas that takes a lot of New Hampshire children, high-level children. So those are children whose needs cannot be met at programs that exist in New Hampshire. And so we spent some time out there assessing the facility, meeting with the children, ensuring that their needs were met, ensuring that they were being cared for by the state here, although their workers aren't present in that state that they are in. And it was quite an eye-opening experience to be able to visit on site and hear from those children. It's something we want to continue to do with our out-of-state funds. And that helps us connect with these children and follow their trajectory and ensure that they make it back to New Hampshire successfully and with supports in place to successfully stay in New Hampshire in the future. So we are looking to continue to do that as we continue to place more and more children out of state. And the reason for that is because our children right now have very high mental health needs, and our programs here are maxed with placements, or they do not have the specialty to meet those needs. And then the in-state travel as well. We travel across the state of New Hampshire to all of the programs here to meet with children, as well as for educational opportunities to educate the public and providers that work very closely with our office about what we do and how to reach us when they do have an issue with any of the state agencies that we oversee. So what is left for our budget and our prioritized needs are our marketing expenses and our current expenses. Our marketing and promotional expenses are important to the work that we do because this is where we get our brochures and our flyers to make sure that we are known as a resource in the state. We also provide materials for children. So we have things like bookmarks that have our name and contact information on it so that the children independently can access our office and not rely on the adults in their lives to do so. And we spend time at children's events, and that is our way currently to reach children who are not residing in those residential facilities. So there's a lot of support events such as NAMI events or DCYF teen events, and we attend those events and look to bring our marketing materials to reach those youth. And so currently we don't have very much in the budget for that, and we'd like to expand. We also have had some changes because of the changes to our statute. We've had some changes that we need to update on the brochures that we currently have. So we're still using older brochures, but having money in this fund would allow us to create additional materials that can go to schools, for instance, because now that we have the expanded jurisdiction over schools, we do need to reach them more than we had in the past. And then current expenses are really our office supplies. We do reduce as much as possible, but given the expanding staff in the office, we do need to continue to keep up with that, as well as the rising costs. They've just risen, and just trying to keep up with the times, we do need additional funds in our current expenses. But we have what we have there for both of the promotional marketing expenses as well as the current expenses is the bare minimum to get by. So I believe that that covers all the costs that we have here. And I am open to any questions you may have.
Questions from the committee members? Senator Bradley.
Thank you very much. Good to meet you.
Meet you as well.
We finally passed and sent to the governor the authorization for the new youth development center with some of the therapeutic treatments. In your opinion, is that going to lessen the number of out-of-state placements?
It should not, because realistically, it should only be taking the very small number of children that require that level of placement, which means that they have received some form of charge that rises to the level of placement in that facility. We should not be sending children out of state that aren't meeting that level of placement. I was highly active in pushing that forward and really advocating for that bill to go through. And I believe if we had not done that, we may have had to send children out of state because we would not have had anywhere else to place them. But it should not be used in replacement of.
Okay, I'm not suggesting that. I was just asking, and thank you for your support
Thank you.
Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 49.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The House increased your budget by $220,000 in the first year and $26,000 in the second year. Has the House met the items that you brought forth in terms of need?
They met all but the three outstanding items, which is that one position, the public relations and training officer position, as well as the current expenses and promotional marketing expenses. The $200,000 differential is the one-time Salesforce project.
Okay, just one other point.
Certainly, Senator.
Of the 200,000 of the 220 in the first year, 200,000 is a technology need, right? And that's addressed with a minimum in the second year of 700. But the other items are your travel is taken care of. Your in-state and your out-of-state travel have been not increased as much as you want. Is that the differential you're looking for?
For those two line items, that is the differential we were looking for, yes.
And then you're looking for more personnel?
We're looking for, yes, one more full-time position, and then the two expense lines in addition, yes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the list is Office of the Right to Know, Ombudsman. On the last department, Administrative Services, LBA, the item that they asked for the extension of the lapse, I know that they're putting together an amendment for me that are some of the things I want. That should be on there, that extension of the deadline for the lapse.
Right to know ombudsman. This is the one I asked about last.
There you
I'm
go.
excited.
And you've got a right to know,
I
Senator.
do indeed.
Good afternoon, Senators. For those of you who haven't met me before, my name is Thomas Gare. For 20 years, I was Policy and Procedure Administrator for the Department of Administrative Services. Today, I represent the Office of the Right to Know Ombudsman, and I brought my entire office with me today. I'll try to keep this short, out of courtesy to people behind me and for the senators. But I became the state's first and perhaps its only right-to-know ombudsman, also known as the RKO, on January 27th, 2023. That's not quite 90 days ago. I say I might be the only one because my office is scheduled to expire on July 1st, 2025. At the end of the biennium, that's being addressed right now. So having been in existence for less than 90 days, I arrived in the budget process over a week. As a matter of fact, this hearing, which I was first called to on March 28th, is my first foray into this budget, which was formulated before my appointment. So, there are a couple of points I'd like to make about that, but first I'd like to tell you what my office does. And it's just me, but I'm administratively attached to the Secretary of State. I've sent around a little packet that has some of the background of my office. I won't belabor it too much because you have it there. You'll find out. You ask me a question anytime you like because you have a right to know. Basically, as I said in the packet, the office is intended to serve as a cheaper, more efficient alternative to the Superior Court when an individual makes a claim that the state or municipality or another governmental official that's covered by 91A had violated RSA 91A. That's the state right to know law. The filing fee to bring that type of case to Superior Court is about $300. I think it's $280. The statutory fee to bring a complaint to me is $25. So any office has to operate under certain statutory deadlines, which I, again, won't belabor right now. But a copy of the complaint procedure set forth by the legislature can be found in tab 1 of the material that I sent out. Set out procedures that are supposed to give us, here too. My job is to review complaints filed in order to decide whether or not there's been a violation of RSA 91A. And I'm also charged with writing administrative rules that describe the processes of my office. Cases were filed in my office even prior to the time that the rules could be established. And at present, cases are being handled under the guidance provided by 91A 7B, and also according to the Justice 800 rules. If anyone knows what those are, they are rules about hearings and adjudicated proceedings that are produced by the Department of Justice and to be used by agencies if the agencies don't have rules of their own. So what I'm spending a lot of time doing is trying to formulate how those match with the procedures of 91A and then issue procedural orders in the cases that come in front of me to say how we're going to handle that particular case as I develop the administrative rules. So there's a considerable amount of procedural work that's been going on. In the interest of time, I won't go into the entire past 90 days. And you can see some things that I've handed out that expenditures have been minimal. And there are some that aren't quite reflected in the expenditure reports that I put at tab 6. But those amount to a few $100. Also not reflected in tab 6 is the fact that I do generate income for the state. It's minimal. With the $25 and so I have brought in $250 for you.
Thank you.
The main thing that I'd like to mention today is that the proposed budget entry for personnel services for fiscal year 24 and 25, the amount set for fiscal year 24 is $84,630. For 25, it's $89,655. But if the committee takes a look at tab 2 of the handout, they will find that my salary for this position is actually labor grade GG, which is step 5, I think, step 5 in GG, and that's $100,256. So my biggest point I guess I'd like to make today is that I would respectfully ask the committee to recommend allocating enough at least in personnel services in order to cover my salary and benefits. And with that, I'm open to questions from anybody.
Questions from committee members? so noted that your budget doesn't contain enough money to pay you.
I appreciate it. So I'm not gonna ask for anything else today, because, it's kind of late, and I just kind of, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Housing Appeals Board. Yeah. All right. I think everybody's ready.
Good afternoon, Senator Gray. It's nice to see you again. My name is Elizabeth Fisher, and I'm from Dover, New Hampshire, and I serve as the chair of the New Hampshire Housing Appeals Board. Many of you may be aware of the work that we do at the Housing Appeals Board. We are a little over 2 years old, and since then we have been busy because there's now an opportunity for individuals who have differences of opinion with regards to housing and housing appeals in the communities across the state of New Hampshire to have the alternative to come to the Housing Appeals Board as opposed to Superior Court. There's a handout going around, I believe, and it gives you some numbers that talk about the opportunities that people have had to file appeals with us. I'm probably biased, but I believe that we have been pretty effective. But before I go any further, I actually want to tell you or introduce you to a young lady who's with me right here, Elizabeth Menard. There are actually two Elizabeths in the Housing Appeals Board, which causes some confusion, but I go by Beth. She goes by Elizabeth. Elizabeth is our extremely able clerk, and I will tell you, I've worked with a lot of people over the years, but she has really risen to the occasion to not only get us, she's been with us from the beginning, but not only get us organized and worked on our website and worked on all the other aspects. And so I want to personally thank her for her efforts. She keeps all of us on time and in place. What's interesting about the Housing Appeals Board is how efficient we are. And now that is driven by the legislation. Probably if we had more time, we would take more time. But we take it very, very seriously that part of the problem with housing development in the state of New Hampshire and also the whole judicial process is the delay that goes on. And so from the get-go, we made the decision collectively, as well as through the legislation, that we were going to hit those deadlines. And so you will find that unlike Superior Court or even the planning process within cities and towns, we're on the mark as far as being able to get decisions out. As a matter of fact, two went out yesterday. And so communities and developers and investors can take a look at the decisions that we've made and move on in their projects. Please understand that we are not a super planning board. We're not a super zoning board. We take a look at the certified record. I just picked one up at the office today, and it is as thick as your binder here. And it has all of the details around whatever the case is in that particular community. And we spend a lot of time going through and making sure that we understand the path that brought these two parties to us. And we take great pride in and I think sometimes the folks that come to our hearings are a little surprised at the questions we ask, because it is so down deep in the documents, the certified record. With regards to the budget, we're comfortable with the numbers that were generated, most of which came from administrative services. They include rent and telecommunications and all of the expenses that it costs to have us exist, and obviously salaries as well. We're a small agency. There's 3 board members, myself, a seasoned real estate attorney, and we're lucky in that our engineer is also a land surveyor. So between the 3 of us, we really cover the experience of housing development, and I think bring to lively discussions as we adjudicate these particular cases. I don't really have anything else other than to say we're very transparent. I want to direct you to our website because you will see, unlike Superior Court, you'll see all of our orders and they're available. You'll also see a schedule of the hearings that we're going to have. They're posted in advance, and people can either come in person to Johnson Hall or to watch them using the WebEx system. They can't testify if they're not part of the process and have not filed an appearance, but they have an opportunity to watch us do our work and watch the conversation go on with the various parties. So with that, I'm going to stop my comments and see if you have any questions.
Questions from committee members? Senator Bertzel.
Thank you. I'm not sure this has anything to do with budget, but do you have any kind of repeat towns that come back to you?
We do. We do. And part of that, I think, is the way that the development process works. Often it's a couple-year process. And so you may end up having a community that has had some decisions that have come from the Housing Appeals Board that were in favor of the community or were in favor of the applicant. And so sometimes it takes a little while to kind of sort through those things. What we are hearing anecdotally is that other communities look very closely at our decisions. And we're finding, and you'll see in the information, we have a few cases that are stayed. And that basically is that they're going back and they're trying to settle. And that's the best solution. They may have filed with us, but then cooler heads prevail. And so we're seeing that happen as well. So I think that's an outcourse. But yes, we do have some
Repeat offenders.
communities that have come before us a couple of times.
One last question.
Another question? Yes, ma'am.
Just one last question. Okay, you said you had a real estate attorney, a land surveyor, and what's
My background is in real estate development. I'm actually a second generation. My dad was a builder and developer over in the Seacoast, and when I got out of UNH, I went to work for him and was there for 17 years, basically running the crews, and then got involved with doing planning and zoning for some nonprofits and some for-profit folks. So I have extensive arrows in my back, I might say, through the development process. I've been on the end of trying to get projects approved in many communities.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Senator Pearl.
Thank you. Have you had any of your decisions appealed to the Supreme Court? I believe that's where it goes if someone disagrees with you.
You're correct. If we come up with a decision and they're either party is uncomfortable with the decision, they have the right within 30 days to appeal it to the Supreme Court. I believe that we have had seven or eight? Oh, 10, excuse me. That's why we have her around here. We have had 10 that are in the process of the Supreme Court. 4 of them, 3 have been adjudicated and by the Supreme Court, and they agreed with us that we got it right. And we spend a lot of time getting it right. And so we anticipate that the decisions that we've made will prevail in the future. The challenge is that once we're done with them, if they choose to appeal to the Supreme Court, they get caught up in that docket. And sometimes it can be a year before it gets settled. Either way. But we feel very, very comfortable that the orders that we produce are based on good legal grounds.
Oh,
Absolutely.
so when your decisions are appealed to the Supreme Court, does that impact your budget in the sense that you have to have additional legal counsel or further work from you?
No, we're actually out of the loop from the standpoint of Elizabeth's responsibility, and my responsibility is to sign off on all of the documents that we received with regards to the case. So we will give them a clean copy of the binder in addition to the decisions that we've made. I don't think there's, and it takes her quite a while to put this together because there's different pieces that, you know, kind of come in
I can
as the
imagine.
case has gone on. But she's pretty proficient in that. But then we just wait. And we wait for a notice like came out today. It didn't have anything to do with us, but the New Hampshire courts, and you scroll down and you go, okay, what did they decide? But we don't participate in any of the conversations.
Thank you.
Sometimes they haven't. They've just agreed with us, but I suppose they could remand it back to us. But we hope that they'll make the decision and they'll agree with us.
Thank you.
So,
Seeing no other questions, well, thank you very much.
thank you.
And we'll have a rousing discussion on information technology next.
Should I ask him about artificial intelligence?
If you want to do that, wait until we get into executive session, and we'll do it then.
Yeah, I know. Oh, yeah, that's good. I like that.
It's all yours.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Did I just hear rousing and information technology in the same
Yes.
sentence?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Very exciting.
Remember, my degree is electrical engineering with a concentration in computer science, so.
Nice, nice. The presentation's going around. Does everybody have a copy? Yes. Okay, good, good. All right, well, I'm going to go through it. I'm not going to read it all, so you'll thank me afterwards for that. But I will try to highlight and go over it in summary, and, you know, we'll go into whatever level of detail you like on any item. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dennis Goulet. I am the Commissioner for the Department of Information Technology. With me today is Ken Dunn, Deputy Commissioner, and the person who runs the show budget-wise, Rose Curry, who sits behind me. She's outside of kicking distance, so I should be safe today. Main call-out on two call-outs on the first page is really we are a fully centralized IT organization for the executive branch. That's a bit unusual in the country. You know, if you look at the National Association of State Chief Information Officers priorities, they talk about consolidation and centralization. This state did that a long time ago, so we're pretty much ahead of the game in that respect. RSA 21R defines our responsibilities. Moving on to page 2, we have a well thought out and documented and fully publicly available strategic plan. This graphic really represents, you know, the kind of our guiding principles. They are not in priority order. They're all important. The one thing I would call out in the mission, because it's particularly important to me, is when I first joined the state, the mission was in service to the agencies. And what we did was we changed that to in service to the citizens. So it's really been helpful to us because, number one, you know, I came from a private sector technology background. You know, we could give out stock options and bonuses and things like that to motivate people. I don't have those tools in my toolbox, but I do have you know, what I think is, you know, that the motivation behind actually providing citizen service. So the implementation of a technology is cool from a geek perspective. Mr. Chair and his electrical engineering knows about geekdom, but what's really cool is thinking about, well, what impact did that have on the citizens, and are we actually making an impact there? So I wanted to call that out. Moving on to page 3, major program changes. There's 2, and the second, cybersecurity, will probably always be there unless the world changes on us, which doesn't appear that it's going to. But the first one's interesting because it goes into the concept of having to change and pivot rapidly and change how we do business, forced on us by COVID. And then the fact that our customers, the citizens of New Hampshire and the agencies that support them, have changed permanently as well. Pace, and then some of the things we do from a tooling perspective, both internally from a collaboration perspective to make ourselves effective and efficient regardless of whether we're sitting at our desk or anywhere really. So I've made it possible now to do work anywhere, myself, to do work anywhere I am. And that was pretty much always the case when I was in the private sector, but not so much in the state. So now that is the case. But the other thing that's happened from a citizen perspective is I think the desire and expectation of having high quality online services, both for citizens and businesses in the state, has increased as well. So we are, you know, I recall hearing from my staff, you know, during COVID, and as we thought it was tailing off a bit, saying, you know, boy, this pace, I don't know if we can keep it up. And in one way we didn't, and that was we stopped working 7 days a week, every week. But the pace, the desire to move quickly on things, and the ability to do so hasn't really changed that much. So we're still in that fairly fast-moving space. Cybersecurity, I probably don't have to speak to any of you about the importance. We take it really seriously, both on the state level, but also on a national level, being national leaders in cybersecurity. And why is it important? Well, in 2015, when I joined the state of New Hampshire, the thing we were most worried about was data breaches, which are bad, right? Having citizen data, whether it's personally identifiable information, public health, health information, or credit card information getting out, that's bad. But it doesn't shut down state government. But now with the advent of ransomware and the fact that the ransomware actors have upped their game in many ways, really makes the continuity of government one of the things we're working towards assuring in the cybersecurity space. So it really has become much more, you know, a breach was embarrassing, always will be embarrassing, and really bad for the citizens affected. But if as you've seen around the country, when an entire city gets shut down by ransomware, that really impacts those citizens in a really negative way. So we're taking that very seriously. And over the past biennium, we did, jumping to page 4, we did have a pretty robust cybersecurity assessment, independent third-party assessment in a number of areas. It actually targeted 7 major areas, including how well we were running ourselves from an operations perspective. There's a pretty lengthy report we took seriously. We worked to address the findings, and so that was a lot of good work that was done, and we did a lot of that just before and during COVID. So we kept busy in the cyberspace. One of the things that's happening is that the volume of attempts and the sophistication level of the attempts keeps going up. So the fact that we're changing how we store data and how we operate systems. So if you look back 10, 15 years, it was castle mentality, right? I had a data center, I protected it, and that's how cybersecurity worked. Now we have data in the cloud, we have it in our data center, so we have it in various places. So the way we work on protecting data is changing, and that's causing us to have to adapt. In addition to the fact that our adversaries are continuing to invest at a faster pace than we are, and so that's really I call it the cybersecurity hamster wheel that we're on. We're running fast and trying to stay at least in place. So bottom line is we're going to vigilance is important. Another important thing that we've changed recently is instead of historically you go every 2 years, you have an independent assessment, they have findings, you fix it. We're actually doing a more continuous assessment methodology now. We're going from place to place in a schedule to agency and doing assessments, but also we're looking at systems as they're about to come live. And then getting in front of that and saying, all right, let's do a risk assessment on this system before we go live. It's particularly, really important systems either from an operational or financial perspective or from a citizen data perspective. So, cybersecurity. moving on to the actual budget, page 5. Key point in paragraph 1 is collaboratively. We work very closely over a period of a year or more preparing this budget before the governor ever sees it. And a lot of that work is done with the agencies individually through the development of their agency information technology plans, which we use to help develop the overall strategic plan for DOIT. And I'll highlight which parts of the budget as we go through it are driven by agency priorities and which part are centralized things. You've noted, or you will note, that there's some noticeable increases in spend. These are the areas that are driving that. And I'm going to go through them just because they're important. One of the things is, the first bullet is a twofold one. It's technology density. We're seeing the investment in technology to enhance and or continue the citizen service mission of the agencies. And I say continue because many agencies are having staffing challenges that can sometimes in part be addressed through technology. But we're also seeing some actual, an agency will take a chunk of money that was in maybe hardware and software or services in the past and actually move it into their DOIT lines instead of keeping it in the agency line. And I think that represents a trend where that the trust we over the years have developed with agencies that they can, they don't have to have technology-based money in other line items inside their budget. It's okay to have it in DOIT. The transformation is a big deal, and it's driven a lot by this need to have more sophisticated online services and more sophisticated and online services. One-time funds to operating expenses. And I look at that pretty closely aligned with the last bullet, which is cyber defense, because if you look over the past biennia, you'll see there's a cybersecurity capital appropriation. What that allows us to do is implement new things using capital appropriation during that biennium, and then it flows into operating, not the total amount, but some of that flows into operating expense. And what we're not seeing is, for cybersecurity, I invested in this new requirement, and now things are falling off requirements. I'm seeing the percentage of total cost in cybersecurity increasing. And then we're seeing inflation. Hardware, software, and labor all increasing. And then the second to last bullet's interesting. We accept a lot of outside funds that come with strings attached. One of the main strings is that we're required to keep supported hardware and software running, so that, and that hasn't gone unnoticed by our suppliers who shorten their life cycles so that we have to buy more stuff and then to stay in compliance. So it's a cynical thing, but it is a revenue and profit generator inside the IT vendor community. Moving on, we get to the numbers finally. On page 6, take you through all of these accounting units. Actually, the first row there is the direct agency budget. That's a number of accounting units, one for each agency. And you look and you say, wow, that's a pretty large increase. And it is. A little over 34% increase. And that's driven by the agencies themselves. In other words, when we're talking about collaboration, we are talking about working with the agencies to develop their budgets. And they make priority decisions inside their total spend, which sometimes results in them spending more money on IT. In fact, I just heard the Office of Child Advocate speaking about that. That's one example that you just heard while I was sitting in the room, but there are many others. So when you look at that and you say, well, what's primarily driving that increase? It's really the increase in density inside any one agency and the fact that there's inflation there as well. The next line item is central IT services and operations. That, if you look at that, you're looking at us mostly driving the priorities there. So that's things that everybody does. And that's so for example, if we're having to add cybersecurity capabilities and that's adding cost, then that's our, that's been our policy decision and that drives that cost. The other thing that you'll see that, in fact, the largest increase there is in that collaboration space. We call that out specifically in the bullets below the Microsoft 365 solution that we implemented for collaboration and remote work, telework capabilities. That is, we're seeing both an increase in usage of the products and also price increases by the vendor are driving those increases. IT salaries and benefits, pretty stable there. So not a lot to comment there. We haven't really, other than the agencies funding unfunded positions, which we've seen in the last couple of biennia, and the fact that we're asking for, which we'll talk about later, a chief privacy officer function in our budget. We haven't seen growth in headcount there in years. Statewide telecommunications, this is really two things. It's the phones on your desk, or now a lot of times there aren't phones on people's desks. They've consolidated and having everything, going to their mobile device, or their desk phone is sitting actually on their PC. But it's the same thing. It's voice over IP, and so we bill that out by rate card. We try to that is a non-lapsing fund. We try to bill just enough that we accumulate enough over a 5 or 6 year refresh period that we're not coming for capital appropriations to refresh what we need to keep that operating. So it's a really effective fund. The last time we went before the Joint Committee for Dedicated Funds, we were able to show that we're not over collecting. We're collecting almost exactly the right amount that we need to do that refresh cycle every 5-6 years on the equipment. The other thing that's in there is all the connections to all the things we do. All the remote locations, like all the liquor stores, for example, have a connection back to the 27 Hazen data center. All of the, DHHS district offices, all of the anything remote out there, sheds, the DOT sheds, things like that. So the way that's done is that's a cost plus. We charge back the agencies at a premium, and then use that money to actually pay the staff that supports all of that. So nice model. It's a very small part of our budget. I'd like to see that increase, but there's challenges with getting, having and moving forward with adding more volume into a dedicated fund. If you look at page 7, you will see that this is a breakdown of all the total budget by class line. You can see where the lion's share is highlighted, where the lion's share of the increases are, and Frank, and quite large part of the budget overall. And then moving on to page 8, some language that is notable. The first is the chief privacy officer function. I think there's over 20 states now that have a chief privacy officer. It's becoming, that function is becoming more important, and what I noticed in New Hampshire is more and more discussion about it, but not really any central program that was driving privacy. So I thought it was the time for New Hampshire to kick that function off. So what I envision is a chief privacy officer, which would be an unclassified position, that is actually nominated by the governor and approved by the executive council. That way we'd have that transparency into who was holding that seat and some accountability there. And then a policy person that supports that individual underneath, as part of the team. And so I'd love to see that pass. I think it'd be a good thing for the state. It's in the House budget now. The second paragraph there in House Bill 2 is really, I'd call it housekeeping. It's renaming our departments, and I'll go into that a little bit more as we go through the presentation. And then the last paragraph there has been it's been in our, I think just for this past biennium was the first time, right? But what this allowed us to do is, as the world's changing on us, In the past, we always had to wait till the next budget cycle to do anything with a position. Say, oh, somebody retired, we need this other position less than this position that just retired, and we'd have to wait, up to 2 years to actually act on that. What this allows us to do is take an unfunded position that we have and then guide it toward, or that position itself, depending on how we do it, guide it toward a different function with the constraints that we don't overspend our appropriation. So very important language for us to be more effective and move faster to adapt. Moving on to page 9, you see that agency direct budget called out specifically, and you see the large proposed increase there. Agency direct is for things that are agency specific, and I say things quite intentionally because it's not people. This isn't a people thing. This is the IT infrastructure, software, and services that is agency specific. You can see how we always try to look at the top 5, 6, 7 agencies. Whatever gets us over 90% of the spend, and you can see now for this biennium, it's 7 agencies get us over 90% of the spend. You can see that half of our business almost is DHHS. Moving to page 10. This is our central IT services. Again, this is things that we do for everybody. Email, collaboration, our core network, support of the data centers, things like that. You can see the list goes on underneath the table itself, and a significant increase there driven by a number of items. Overwhelmingly, though, the largest piece of that increase is in the Microsoft 365 space. And then you can see on page 11, the shared IT services breakdown, much like we did for total IT. Again, you see the total amounts highlighted and in the hardware, software, and services lines. Also, a little more detail at the bottom there on what goes into those lines themselves. Page 12, salaries and benefits. Again, relatively low drama. You see a little bit more information there, and you see the old name first of the 4 departments that are defined in statute in 21R, and their new names. Why are we renaming them? It aligns with our strategic plan. It also aligns with how IT function is being run in the world now versus how it was run, say, 15 years ago in the world. So we're really catching up with where the world is. And in particular, the last one, user experience, because we used to say, oh, I have a website. And that was like described what you were doing now, but I don't look at it that way. I look at our as anything we present to citizens and businesses of the state as a digital government asset, and that the experience of those individuals and how they interact with government is really important. So having the name of your organization align with your core mission, to me, is really important. So I would ask for support on that language to do the naming as well. Moving on to page 13, an org chart. Again, you see the divisions, old name in red, new names in highlighted black. And you can see the number of positions we have, authorized positions, of which 11 are unfunded under this plan as it's passed by the House. The other thing I'll call out is the table at the bottom and the percentage of unclassified versus classified employees. What that says to us, we always like to look at this because we don't want to be top heavy. We want to have stuff getting done, not a bunch of managers contemplating things behind desks. So that's what I think this tells you when you look at it. Moving on to page 14, telecommunications. Again, you see that the total spend, very modest increase, particularly in light of the recent inflation, and then the breakdown on the actual class lines themselves. And finally, on page 15, a small number of additional asks. The first two are Department of Safety. Their request is to fund a couple of unfunded positions to focus on particular areas that they think are important in their business. We confirmed very recently with Steve Lavoie in the Commissioner's office that they will be asking for this. I don't know if they've testified before you yet, but they do want this, so we've had that crosstalk between safety and DOIT, and they would like these two positions funded. Not establishing new ones, but funding existing unfunded positions. The Fish and Game Veterans Home, that's a shared IT lead. IT lead is kind of the heart and soul of IT in most agencies. It reports into IT, but they sit in the agency. They live the life of the agency, and both of those agencies have really been starved of IT leadership over the years that I've been here. So we spoke to them and said, hey, you know, it'd probably be great if you had a full-time person, but you may not be able to afford it. So why don't we split an IT lead between these two agencies? And interestingly, Veterans Home Division I, they were going to fund this. Division II didn't fund it, so then it didn't get funded. And so now here we are with that ask. Both of those agencies have want these funded. So I would, and that's super important because particularly like in the Veterans Home space, they have that staffing challenge. We have IT, their IT strategic plan is all around using technology to mitigate to what extent possible the challenges they're having with staffing, and there's some plans behind that, but we really need the leadership there to help. And Fish and Game is modernization. They have a huge modernization challenge. Having a half of a person there focusing on that would be a big deal for Fish and Game. And the last thing is to me is housekeeping. There's something happened in the House process where the agriculture budget got this funding in it, but ours did not. So this wouldn't actually increase the total appropriation, but it would make it so that we can actually do the work. So, and that concludes my presentation. Sorry it was so long, but there's a lot of we have a lot going on, and I didn't want to slight you on sharing what I shared with the governors and the House as well. So,
questions from committee members. Senator Pearl.
Thank you. I'm going to start at the end, since that's where you finished.
Okay.
So the agricultural portion that you're including here, is that what we appropriated last year or the year before to put in enact the animal database?
Yeah, that continues that, yeah.
That was the position that we funded then?
Well, this isn't the position itself. The position's there and working, actually. It's the services stuff and other things that they need to fulfill that mission. And right now, what happened, for some reason, I can't explain why, if you look at my budget, it's a bunch of details that come up to a number. If you look at an agency budget, it's one line, class 27. It's actually two lines, class 27 and telecom. And so that number is in these numbers are in the agriculture line. They're not in mine. So to me, this is just a administrative adjustment. It doesn't affect the total appropriation.
One more?
Senator Pearl.
The next one back with the Fish and Game and the Veterans Home. So the Fish and Game, we enacted we instructed them to go to like online licensure for hunting licenses. And I know we're looking at doing online registration of snowmobiles as well. Would this position help support those?
Yeah, very much so.
Okay,
Very
thank
much
you.
so.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. So on page 9, where you talk about the top 7 agencies, are these costs also reflected in those agency budgets? So we're really double counting these expenses? If we could ever figure out a way to undo that?
Well, actually, we do. In fact, this was 2 biennia ago. We noticed, or maybe it was more than that. It might be more than that. We collectively noticed that, that double counting wasn't getting backed out. So if you take my budget and then you take the total of the telecom and class 27 budgets in the agencies, those will equal each other. So at the time, I think my budget was, so let's, so it gets double appropriated. But then if you look at the bottom of, somewhere on the bottom, this was when Joe Bouchard was still here, he backs that out. There's a couple other agencies that have a similar situation, or parts of agencies. So that all gets backed out, so that's no longer being double counted.
Okay. Could I ask one more
Yes,
question?
ma'am.
Thank you. The $15 million a year that you are spending for consultants for HHS, what do we get for that? Is that MMIS? Those consultants are, why do we keep having to pay these giant amounts of money every year for a system that every state ought to have?
Well, it's constant change. There's two things that we're paying for in our, like the two largest systems in the state, or the three largest systems in the state, two of them are in HHS. One is your Medicaid. You've got your integrated eligibility, which is New Heights and New Hampshire Easy. And then you've got New Hampshire First, which you've probably heard about when Charlie was here earlier. In the case of HHS, and I'll just use those two examples, any policy change, whether it's federal or state policy change, or new requirements from the feds on cybersecurity and privacy, have ripple effects right through those systems. So we're always stacking up amendments to those contracts, bringing them to governor and council to adapt to the new, whatever the new requirement is. And so that's driving a lot of costs. But also, a lot of these systems are being maintained under contract by contractors, not state employees. So state employees are overseeing. So if you look at the model for Medicaid, and both Medicaid and integrated eligibility, you've got state employees managing large contracts.
Thank you.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A great job, but I've asked this question on numerous occasions. Everybody that has HHS has an MIS program, but why isn't there a standard? Because the federal government makes the changes, but those changes are accepted by everybody because you're all in the game. But why isn't there some standard? I mean, particularly in this area where it's so vast, there should be a standard.
You're Senator D'Alessandro, you're speaking to the choir here. It's one of the things that kind of annoys me from a policy perspective is that CMS will allow states to, within certain parameters, to roll their own Medicaid policy and pay 90/10 to get it done in their systems. So there's no disincentive for a state from a system perspective to make changes because it's going to get paid for 90/10. So I'd much prefer that, this is just Dennis speaking, not the Commissioner of IT, but I'd prefer that weren't the case.
I just can't, it's hard for me to accept the kinds of changes that we make. I've been following this system now for almost 50 years. And it comes up every biennium.
I will point out, though, one of the ways we historically, Ken and I both come from the private sector, and one of the ways you measure your IT efficiency is as a percentage of cost or as a percentage of revenue. So when you say, you look at the Medicaid system, you say, boy, we're spending a lot of money on that. If you looked at the industry, you'd say as a percentage of cost, which is, what is it, almost $2 billion in Medicaid payments a year now. It's a really small percentage. It's very competitive. So gross amount looks really large by industry standards and how you would measure your effectiveness. And that's actually a small percentage, and it includes business process outsourcing as well as technology in the conduit contract. So it's not even fair if you took out the business process outsourcing, that stuff that's in that contract, it's even smaller percent for technology. So yes, big amount of money, very relatively small by comparison percent of total cost.
Seeing no other questions, I do have a comment. If there is a disconnect between your budget and the agriculture budget, you need to get with LBA, figure out what it is, because it could be money that's sitting out there that if we don't do anything with it, it'll lapse. So I want you to get to the end of that and get us a report back.
We will drop you a note right away.
Again, that's why we need to get to the end of it. And again, if the money is sitting out there and it's not being spent, then we're not doing the right thing that we all want to do. So thank you very much for your testimony. And the next one up is Conservation Land Stewardship Program.
It goes up to 15.9.
What?
In 2025, it goes up to 15.9.
All yours. You gotta get the red button, get the button so that it's red.
Oh,
There you go.
thank you. This is why I have someone young with me.
All right.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Walker, and I'm the Director of the Conservation Land Stewardship Program, CLS for short. On July 1, 2021, the Office of Strategic Initiatives was rearranged to create a new Department of Energy. Consequently, this also resulted in CLS becoming a small agency administratively attached to the Department of Administrative Services. This is the first time CLS is going through the biennial budget process. CLS continues to fulfill its duties much the same as it has for its nearly 3 decades of existence. In short, the CLS mission is to protect the state's interests in the important conservation investments it has made. The majority of land conservation projects CLS is responsible for came into existence through the Land Conservation Investment Program, LCIP, that ran between 1987 and 1993. After this acquisition phase ended, the first iteration of CLS was set up and staffed in 1994 to continue with the stewardship phase. The LCIP was considered such a successful endeavor that in 2000, the more familiar Land and Community Heritage Investment Program, LCHIP, was created. Unlike LCIP, LCHIP was designed to be an expanded and ongoing endeavor. Each year, CLS prepares an annual status report for the Council on Resources and Development, CORD, regarding the 450-plus properties we are associated with. This document, found on the CLS website, succinctly explains the CLS program. RSA 162C governs CORD, and their responsibilities include the LCIP properties. The main source of funding for CLS comes from the Land Conservation Endowment, LCE, that was set up in 1993 to provide for the perpetual stewardship of the LCIP conservation interests. The LCE is administered by CORD through a custodial agreement with State Treasury. In front of you are 2 charts that illustrate the composition of CLS. The first chart page articulates the 2 parts of LCIP, state and municipal, which constituted the original program. The second chart page illustrates the entire CLS program that includes the responsibilities that CLS has taken on through a Memoranda of Agreement, MOA, with New Hampshire Fish and Game and the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources through the Division of Forest and Lands. These MOAs provide the other sources of funding that support CLS. CLS does not receive general funds. You'll note that the MOA with DNCR will only be renewed for the first year of the biennium. For the second year, DNCR has budgeted for a new position within DNCR that will be responsible for the stewardship of the entirety of their conservation easement interests. This new model combines the monitoring role of the very large acreages in the northern portion of the state currently performed by DNCR with those in the southern portion currently monitored by CLS. The majority of the state-held conservation properties CLS works primarily with are conservation easements. These properties are privately owned, with the state holding a legal interest. and having the primary stewardship responsibility. CLS also works with 78 municipalities that participated in LCIP as well. The municipalities hold the primary stewardship responsibility for these 250-plus conservation properties, comprised of both conservation easement and fee-owned properties. For municipalities, CLS conducts more of a general oversight and technical support role. We refer to the overarching function of that CLS performs as stewardship. The responsibility is to keep an eye on each and every property to ensure that the conservation values that the state invested in remain intact. Working with sister agencies and municipalities, we accomplish our mission chiefly through regular communications with our constituent landowners and municipalities in conjunction with site visits. And I would just like to thank Department of Administrative Services. When we became this little two-person agency, we were kind of like dropped off on their doorstep in a basket, and they really took us in and very kindly and ably, and it's been a 2-year process getting to this point, and so I wanted to recognize them as well. And
Questions from the senators? All right, thank you very much.
thank you.
He was smiling during all of that. He had a big grin. Office of the Governor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is James Gary. I am the State Budget Director. However, today I'm here not to talk about the state budget, but only a very small portion of it. I'm here to explain the Governor's Office portion of the Executive Department's budget. I know I was allotted 10 minutes to speak, and when I first received this invitation, I had thought that it was going to encompass the entire state budget. Because within 10 minutes, I was going to have to talk really fast. But my presentation is a very short one. So for the record, I'm not the one who put together this budget. When I did the state budget, I did not work on this one. However, the person who would normally be testifying can't make it today, so I'm happy and honored to fill in for her. The governor's office, as you may know, includes not only the governor, but the chief of staff, his chief legal counsel, the budget director, as well as legislative and policy people who many of you work with pretty closely. It also involves citizen services, and what citizen services is, it's pretty much the complaint department for the state of New Hampshire. Line's too long at DMV, they get a call. Someone gets a speeding ticket they didn't think they deserve, they get a call. But in addition to all those, what I would call somewhat trivial complaints, they get real serious issues as well. I can't afford my electric bill. They're going to shut off my power. What do? I have a son with a mental illness and the local hospitals and police department don't seem to want to help. Where can I go? So they're dealing with those as well. So in addition to all that, we have people who not only deal with you, but with the state agencies and the executive council as well. So that's what we do. And as you can see in the handout I provided, this proposed budget increases appropriations from just over 1.9 million in fiscal year 23 to just over 2.1 million in both fiscal year 24 and 25. This is a simple budget. There are no bells and whistles, no moving parts. We're just a bunch of people with computers and a couple of copy machines. The Office of the Governor has shown little growth over the past 10 years, including the proposed increases in fiscal years 24 and 25. The Governor's Office budget has increased at an average annual rate of less than 3% over the last 10 years. This is well below the inflation rate for that period, most real and projected. The largest dollar increases in the budget are for personal services, salaries, and they will increase from 1.15 million to 1.29 million, and the corresponding benefits go from 399,000 to 473,000. However, the largest percentage increases are for DOIT, which just gave their presentation. It's 39%. That seems to be pretty standard. That's what the legislature's was as well. And for rents and leases for 28%. Those rents and leases were the copy machines I mentioned before. Traditionally, the governor's budget in the executive branch has always been leanly funded, no matter the year, no matter the governor or the governor's party, or who controls the legislature. The governor's office has been leanly funded. And this budget, I'm proud to say, continues the tradition. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any
Questions from
questions.
senators? Senator Rosenbaum.
Thank you. Until last year, I had never seen non-classified. And we saw it once when we bought Hampstead Hospital, and we created 6 non-classified positions. This might be a question for the OBA, but why are these positions non-classified instead of unclassified?
Yeah, Senator, great question. I don't know the history of it. I am a non-classified human being, as is the rest, other than the governor, who is an unclassified. Everyone else who works in the governor's staff is non-classified.
I actually might refer to Charlie on this because I know he did give
Charlie,
a presentation
we've
to the
got a
House on
seat right over here with a microphone. All
on
you have to do is turn it on.
classifications.
There are very few positions in state government that are non-classified, as opposed to classified and unclassified. Non are budgeted not by position, but as a just dollar amount. And technically, what you're approving is a number of, $1.2 million. And if the governor wanted, he could pay somebody $1 million and like 85 people $12. I don't think that math works, but so non-classified is that way. Traditionally, non-classified are used for jobs that are essentially political. Most legislative staff is non-classified, and the governor's staff is non-classified. And it's because under FLSA, there are different restrictions on them.
Additional questions?
Thank you, Senator.
And it is noted that the House didn't mess with your budget at all, so. All right, thank you very much.
If you want to pass the budget as is, I'd greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
That concludes the budget presentations for today. We will open the hearing in just a couple of minutes on House Bill 384, but we're going to give the staff a few minutes. Any of the senators need a minute or two? Okay. So we'll recess for at least 5 minutes, and then we'll come back. We will open the hearing on House Bill 384 and ask the prime sponsor to introduce himself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Tracy Emmerich. I represent Rockingham District 29, which is Hampton. And I'm here, I think I'm here because I got the short straw. Only I didn't know I got the short straw until my name appeared as the sponsor. What this bill does is appropriate $25 million to build a new parking garage, basically where the Department of Justice currently sits. It includes raising that building and also raising the Stores Street legislative parking garage. It establishes a commission to oversee the project, which actually, when the project is done, it goes away. So, and a commission that actually ends. I'm not real strong on how to build buildings, so my primary function here is just to introduce the bill. I do have Commissioner Arlinghouse from DAS, who's running the book on this, and also Terry Pfaff, who's the COO, who also has a very wide breadth of information that I don't have. And so if there are any questions other than my introduction, I'd refer you to one of those two.
But I still have to ask the question. Do the senators have any questions? No. Seeing none, thank you very much. Oh, you were hiding back there.
I'm hiding, yeah. Thank you, Representative. My understanding is you would like us to amend this bill to add Terry Poff to the commission, as well as somebody designated by the city of Concord. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
All right, seeing no additional questions.
And I will be leaving because I have another appointment, but I'm very interested in moving forward. Thank you.
Charlie. Commissioner, you're the next one on the list. Sure. And you're even going to bring helpers.
It's very important. I have no degrees in engineering whatsoever. Michelle Giuliano is the Deputy Director of Public Works for the state, of our department, and she'll be the smart one here today, and I'm just a pretty face. But we're here to answer any questions about its money to build a parking garage, and do you have any questions about the garage and what, where, how much, et cetera?
Senator Bertson.
Thank you. If I recall, when this was first proposed, it cost a lot less. Do you know what the number was?
So so here's the thing about how much things cost. There are a lot of discussions that people have, and there will be random people who say things like, I bet we could build a garage for $10 million, $20 million, $40 million. And if those people aren't engineers or architects, you shouldn't believe them. So I know there's been a lot of discussion about what this might cost, and at some point somebody said 15 million, somebody said 50 million. And those have been sort of the bookends. In truth, a good ballpark estimate, and again, it's a ballpark estimate, is about 50 grand a space. If you want to figure out how big your garage. So if you build a 650 space garage, it's going to cost more. If you build a 200 space garage, it's going to cost less. And in discussions with mostly House leadership, I remember being in the Speaker's office with architects and a bunch of people from our staff, and Representative Emmerich, et cetera, and they said no more than 25 million. And what we've committed to is we will build you as good a garage as you can get for 25 million. And that's the understanding is that's the garage. And so which would probably be about 375 spaces.
Thank you.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Charlie, a study was done, I believe, when Ted Gatsas was president of the Senate, or in that area, about a garage. Is that still worthwhile? Or it's still, I mean, obviously we have it because we paid for it, but is it still around?
I know I've seen it. I might even have a copy on the bookshelf behind my desk, but I think it's La Valley Brunzinger maybe, but, and there's certainly stuff in that that's interesting. A lot of the, guesstimates about the needs for parking by agencies, do we build a garage do we take the plot of land and build partly a garage and partly a building? Those are different kind of questions. There are no soil samples. The real question marks about this building are, a garage is garages are garages. They aren't really that, like, do you want one that parks cars? Yes, okay. And that's the big picture. Yeah, we need to design it in a way that it fits in with a historical district, and that's very important. Soil samples. It's a very wet piece of property. Downtown Concord generally is wet, and so that's going to run into questions about things like footings. And then traffic studies and how does the traffic work? And what we would like to do is not be a blight upon the city's landscape. And I think the city would like, I don't speak for the mayor, but I think they would like that too. But so are there studies in the past? Yes. Are they useful? They're not useful.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Rosenbaum.
Thank you. I'm wondering if ARPA funds could be used instead of surplus general funds, and what we would be doing with the space, the land that Store Street is on afterwards. I don't see that addressed in the bill.
I don't think it is addressed in the bill. I think, so I'm going to deal with the second part of the question first. What we have are air rights, right? So if you think of the Store Street garage, it's not on land, it's over the road.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we have are the air rights. So we have the rights to build a parking garage above the road. And so there's no land that we would be, and then you can put the footings there. But, that building, presuming it doesn't blow over in a hurricane, we should be okay. I doubt anything will happen. I'm sure there'll be discussions with the city about, do you want us to relinquish the air rights? I think that will all be amicable. Okay. I don't think, my guess is the city does not want a second giant concrete and steel garage as their welcome to the city there. And so they probably won't do that. What was the first part of the question? I'm sorry.
Could we use ARPA funds?
Could we use ARPA funds? I don't, from our standpoint, there's no restriction on whichever funds you use. That's more of a question for Gopher, I think, about are there ARPA funds available? I think my understanding about ARPA is there are multiple buckets, and I don't know how much money is left in each bucket.
Nobody knows that. Thank you.
Additional questions? Nope. Seeing none, thank you. You're the last one on my list. Is there anyone out there that wants to testify that has not? And with that, we will close the public hearing. I would like a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
We'll have a motion from Senator Ennis, a second from Senator Birdsell to enter executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. We are in executive session. To start off with, we will not be doing anything with the parking garage today. So if anybody's waiting.
I got rid of someone.
Don't forget, you're on the commission, and you're on the commission.
Oh.
We're not going to do anything with the parking garage today. Well,
We're not.
again, why don't you have a conversation with me after this meeting and I may be more vocal on the issue? Okay? How's that? I think I've got thousands of people that are likely in the room, but
I don't know if
we
that's
have,
interesting.
hey, remember that this is in the internet now, so it's out there forever. And so it might take us a while to get to 1,000. 5 people are currently watching. And one of them sitting right there. So anyway.
And the rest are upstairs.
First of all, let's take up the bills that we have before us already. The first one being House Bill 555. Appropriating state general funds surplus towards retirement system unfunded accrued liability. Do we have discussion before I take any motion? Okay. Senator Rosemore.
Well, I don't know where 75% came from, but that seems like a lot.
Yes.
To me. And also we could undo it in House Bill 2 right away, or we could, in 2 years, somebody else could undo it. So I think I said before, I'm a control freak, so I
Okay, any
don't
other,
see the need, but 75% seems like really a lot.
Yes.
any other comments before I take a motion? Okay.
Do you want to say something?
We'll make a motion.
Ready to make a motion? Senator
Yeah.
Bradley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll move ought to pass with 2 changes.
Let me get a second on the auto pass first.
Second.
Senator Ennis, seconds. All right, we have Senator Bradley wants to make an amendment.
On line 12, I would propose that we substitute 25% for 75%. On page 2, line 1, change the date from 2023 to 2025. So we're gonna, and if I can speak to why.
Absolutely.
So we're gonna have a debate about, funding a drawdown of the unfunded liability in HB 2. There was a $50 million appropriation. I don't know if we're gonna be able to do that or not based on what we're all gonna be faced with over the next month. But this is aspirational, and as such, I think it should go into the next budget. It's like anything else, it could be changed, modified, et cetera, in the future budget, but it sort of lays a stake in the ground that some amount of surplus should go to reducing the unfunded liability.
Okay, just to keep us straight here administratively, I've got Senator Ennis seconding that motion for the amendment.
Yes.
Okay, discussion on the motion.
Yes, thank you, Senator Bradley. When we heard this bill and kind of discussed it briefly before, you said you thought we should pass it and lay it on the table. Is that still your thinking?
Well, I mean, we could discuss that too, but I wouldn't have a problem with passing it with this amendment. If we didn't have this amendment, I would definitely favor tabling it, and it probably would stay on the table.
Change how I would vote. Just, that's why I was asking.
My only concern is passing it as is and tabling it shows that we support 75%. We don't.
Right.
So I mean, I'm okay with the 25, if it's possible in 2025. Or I'm okay with changing it to 25 and tabling it.
Without the date change.
With the 25.
The 20, from what I'm hearing, the amended motion would be if we change it to 25%, but leave the date the same, then the majority of the committee sounds like they want to table it. If we change it to 25, but change the date so that it doesn't hit in the next budget, but in the budget after, then it would not be tabled, and whatever happens in the next budget would be the prevailing expenditure that would be authorized or not by that legislature. Have I got that stated correctly?
I believe so.
Is there additional conversation? Senator Pearl.
Thank you. I think it's just good fiscal policy for us to show that we recognize that we have an unfunded liability and that we want to take some action on it, but we realize that we have to be reasonable and prudent in the amount of our surplus that we put towards it. So I think I can support the changes in Senator Bradley's amendment.
Senator D'Alessandro, your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, that is. I think we have a plan to take care of the unfunded liability. That plan was put together with some very serious discussion, and it's in place. And according to Marty's testimony, it's been effective, and it is reducing the unfunded liability. I don't think we should think about committing subsequent legislatures to doing things. We have something in place. We've spent a long time. I was around here when the changes were made. I had some different thoughts about it at that time. Some of those thoughts went down the drain. I understand that. But I think we got a plan in place. We got to follow the plan. Otherwise, why plan? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Additional conversation?
So,
Yeah,
Lou, what does that mean?
right.
That means I'm not voting for the bill.
That's what I thought.
No
Okay.
matter what it looks
I wasn't sure if you were
Against.
okay with tabling or, okay.
So ITO.
Got it.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
I would
Senator
just say
Rugg.
that I'd be okay with tabling it. But if we're gonna send it back to the House and maybe go to conference, I can't vote for it either. Because we do have a plan, we have House Bill 2, we maybe have the cannabis bill, which also addresses the unfunded liability of the pension. So there's so many balls in the air that I think it's early to pick one.
All right. So what we're going to do, we're going to vote on the amendment as stated. And if that amendment fails, then we'll go to possibly another amendment that doesn't change the date. Because that's the thing that we heard about, knowing that there are senators here that if we do not change the date, then they would like this tabled after passage. Okay? So with all of that as ground rules, the motion in front of us is to change line 12 on page 1 to 25% and to change line 1 on page 2, change the year to 2025 vice 2023. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? And so it sounds like I got,
I voted for that amendment.
you voted for the amendment, so that's 6-1. So the amendment passes, okay? We're open for further amendment. Seeing none. Now we're gonna vote on the ought to pass as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That is a 5-2. And I'll take that one out.
All right. And then you'll stand up again. Okay.
All right. Next one on the list is 377.
Oh, yes.
May I? Yeah. I appreciate the intent of this bill. I hesitate because I feel it's forcing programs and expenditures on local schools and takes away some of their freedom to deal with these issues on their own. I tend to trust the local schools and the school boards to do what's best for their students. And I'm resistant to use state statute to force their hand on something like this. It's not out of a lack of appreciation for those students that suffer with this. I have friends and family who do and have, but I do have concerns with telling the schools they must. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't have a second on the motion yet of ought to pass.
Oh, for discussion, I'll second.
Okay. Senator Birdsell seconds.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
In response to Senator Enos's, I'm looking at the fiscal note
Yes.
and I don't see a local expenditure, and I would have expected to.
Me too.
So I don't get why there would not be a cost on the local school district.
There has been some discussion among senators that this might pass and then get tabled.
So can I just got a text from the sponsor. She says it's a free assessment.
Say that again?
She says it's a free assessment.
Somebody's got to administer.
Wait, that's right. I mean, it can't be free.
Right. Nothing is free.
Right.
I guess I would share Senator Enos's concerns.
Mr. Chairman, if you read the testimony, the letter spoke we provided by the Department of Education offered free training to 9,000 educators and approximately 750 administrators. Ultimately proved a success. In this case, we believe that they have just recently approved their cohort to be trained. So that came from the New London resident. It was the testimony given at
I see that.
She says it can be done in the classroom. Many of the classrooms are doing it. It's free. It takes 10 minutes.
her son was involved, I guess. Her son was tested.
But this program is presently in existence, though.
Is
right?
what?
The program is presently in existence. So schools can take advantage of it. I guess my question is, do we need a bill to do this? If so, or if we pass it and table it, okay. I mean, I'm not, no. Our schools have a lot going on. Another rule honestly concerns me on anything. And if the resource is there and available, then let's let the schools take advantage of that.
Well, could I say something?
Absolutely.
I'm reading that hearing report, and that schools would need more time to draft and prepare intervention plans. So the screening might not cost a lot of money, but the rest of it would incur expense, and I don't see that we're providing an appropriation, so I worry about that downshift too. I like the idea of it
Yeah, right.
a lot,
I'm with you.
yeah.
So as a general question, if not through this screening, but through any other means, a student is identified as being dyslexic, what is the obligation of the school? That's where,
Don't they get an IEP?
Yes.
right, they would get the IEP. The IEP would dictate what is going to happen, and therefore, I'm not really concerned that it's going to identify more, because now we're going to provide the required services to that child, and maybe he'll grow up being able to spell better than I can.
So, but the problem is, it's a screening and intervention for kindergarten through second grade, so they would catch it a lot earlier than they are in the classrooms right now.
Yes.
And they can set up an IEP much earlier.
Senator D, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I think one of the things, we have in our family a child who needed a lot of help. And if it weren't for the really pushing of the parent, it might not have happened. Now, his problems were so severe that they couldn't go unnoticed. I mean, it was absolutely impossible for them to go unnoticed. But indeed, there are others who fall into that same category whose parents sometimes aren't as persuasive. And I served on a school board for 10 years in Manchester. And I can tell you that there were many of these things that were undetected. that cause numerous problems, going forward. I mean, so much of this falls on the parent.
Yes.
I mean, it's really parent responsibility. I recognize that. Anything we can do to enhance their ability to get something done, I think is important.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ennis.
Looking at the fiscal note, under methodology, the Department of Education states it does not know each individual local school district's current practices regarding the evidence-based screeners and provision for modified, et cetera. Therefore, unable to estimate this bill's potential impact on local school district expenditures. I don't think we know the present situation.
In the beginning of your book,
Yeah, did I miss
there's
something?
probably an amended one.
Okay.
I don't know that
That's
it's
the same.
significantly different,
No, it's the same.
but
Same language. Yeah. So, I'm worried we may pass a bill that addresses a problem that we don't understand or that doesn't exist.
Okay, so why don't we do what we had planned on doing is pass
and
the table and see if we can't get some numbers
I can do that. Yeah.
from education or,
and that would get you time to take it off the table if you
Yeah, yeah.
want to.
Okay.
or put it in the budget.
That's not unreasonable. Sure.
Further discussion?
I would just say the one thing that jumps off the charts for me in the hearing report, 55% of children in New Hampshire were incapable of reading at grade level now.
What is that?
We're having a national debate about artificial intelligence, but I think that reading is foundational. So I'm going to support this.
Okay.
We have through the years provided a subsidy for children who can't read at the third grade level in our adequacy formula. That's been a part of our adequacy formula for an extended period of time. So we recognize the fact that kids aren't reading at grade level, at third level, for a variety of reasons, obviously, but they're not accomplishing. And if they don't make it by the third grade level, in most instances, they never recover.
Right.
Very true. Further discussion?
Okay.
Okay, we have the motion ought to pass. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? And it's unanimous. And who would like to take it out?
I will.
Okay, Senator Birdsall.
That's my rep.
Okay. The only other bill that we haven't discussed is 435, education adequacy grants. I'm not touching that one until I have to with all the stuff that's going on in the courts.
Oh, I
So-
see. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Shouldn't this bill have a fiscal note?
It's in here because it may have fiscal implications. And so I took it into finance because of that.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to hold on to this because depending upon the information that comes out in the courts, it may be a very different decision that I'm making because of that. So it's here. It's, got to be acted on, in a month or so. But until then, it's going to stay where it is.
Just surprised there's no FN on it.
And that was noted, but I took it anyway.
No, yeah.
Okay. So right now, on our next report, there'll be two bills listed. 384 and 435. Okay, to help us along, LBA has suggested, I don't know, I think you've all gotten this report. Well, don't, because they don't have it with them anyway. But there has been several of these that we have had the hearings for, that there's no general funds or there's no change in the general funds because they're a self-funding organization. I have highlighted some of those with LBA, and LBA can take those, get them back to us so that, this is the sheet that I intend to, with some modification, be the one that tracks. And remember that if something is listed on here as not requiring a change at this time, doesn't mean that you can't pull it off of there and make a change in the future. We just want to get that number down so that we're talking about the things that are going on.
Could we get copies of that?
That's,
Example, that is not something that Mike can put together for them. It's an example of the sheet that we used in the last 5 budgets. Oh, but we don't have it this year.
you're going to have it this year because I just asked LBA to, well, I want it with the ones that I've, circled, so.
I haven't seen it either. So it's, yeah, you're not being left out.
So again, we're not discussing it today, but after tomorrow's notice for the meeting, all the future ones will have exec session on there so that if we do want to talk about things that we are authorized under 91A to do so. But again, I want to get as many of those firmed up as we can so that they're done. The legislative branch, okay, is an example. We're not going to play with the legislative branch's budget because we already did it, okay? So, executive council, their budget isn't really going to be changed, So there's several of those like that, and that's what I've decided to do. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Any final things while we're in executive session? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to come out of executive session.
Second.
Moved by Senator D'Alessandro, seconded by Senator Ennis. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? We are out of executive session, and our business of the day being completed, we are adjourned.
We're not meeting tomorrow?
Not tomorrow, Thursday and Friday.
Okay.
All right. See you Thursday.
All right.
And maybe Friday.
Senator Lou.